comes from as the music dies. Something in your eyes calls to mind a silver screen.
The ground. How dry it is. Yeah. They are prepared like. Public company. It's a public company, but it's yeah. If you want to if you send an email to my the phone number. I don't know the VP and they can tell you because they are selling all of the data is what cheap.
Buenos dias, good morning. Thank you so much for being here, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thank you for joining us this morning for this event. My name is Jemima Njuki and I'm the Chief of Economic Empowerment at UN Women. I am delighted to be here today and to see all of you joining us to shed light on innovative financing for gender equality, a really important topic during this summit. I'm especially pleased to welcome Mayor Claudia Lopez, the Mayor of Bogota. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to have you with us this morning. Let me also thank the Finance in Common Secretariat for organizing such a fantastic event, an event where we know issues of gender equality and financing for gender equality have been at the center of many, many conversations that we have had over the last 3 days. I would also like to thank our co-hosts for this session, the Inter-American Development Bank and the Gender Coalition of the Finance in Common, as well as the International Development Finance Club. As you all know, I'm sure, UN Women is the United Nations entity that's dedicated to gender equality and the empowerment of women. And since the first edition of the Finance in Common Summit, we co-chair the FIX Coalition on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment in Development Banks. We convene public development banks and partners around this common agenda to place women and girls at the center of discussions on sustainable development. We are also placing a strong emphasis on financing mechanisms and practices that allow the closing of the gender gaps and the inequalities that we see around the world. We believe public development banks have a strong role to play to ensure that no woman or girl is left behind. Today's event intends to focus on the role of public development banks in bringing innovations in financing programs targeting women's financial inclusion and access to finance for women SMEs. And to do so, we are joined by a really amazing group of people who will share some of their expertise and some of the actions that they are taking to support this agenda. And before I call on them, we really are extremely pleased to have Mayor Lopez with us, who's a champion for gender equality. We know Mayor Lopez for her enormous capacity for collective action around issues of gender equality and the empowerment of women. We are thrilled to directly hear from you the importance of getting it right when it comes to supporting women's access to finance, women's entrepreneurship, and decent work opportunities. And I know you also care so much about some of the issues we care about, including women's unpaid care work and how we can address that so that women's economic participation and economic autonomy can be guaranteed. Mayor Lopez, you have the floor.
Well, probably I will do it in English. Probably it's better for everyone, or should I go in Spanish? Some recommendation. In Spanish? Bueno.
Mejor en español, better in Spanish? Okay, then I'll do it in Spanish. Welcome, everyone, to Cartagena, to Colombia. Thank you very much, Bancoldex, for this generous invitation. and for the work that you've supported of us during all these years. It is a great opportunity to have people here who are dedicated to financing development, inclusion, climate change, the most important challenges of our times in our country, to together think about how we're doing things, share the experiences we have, the learned lessons we have, and hopefully create solutions even more innovative, even more pertinent, even more inclusive than those we have ongoing. I am Claudia Lopez. I'm the mayor of Bogota. Bogota has the wonderful honor of being the capital city of Colombia. It is a city with 8 million inhabitants who live, sleep, grow, work in Bogota, and 2 additional million who come in every day. So it's a city region of 10 million people. That is approximately 20% of Colombia's population. We contribute with 25% GDP as a city and close to 1/3 of Colombia's GDP as a region. We're an innovative city, creative, diverse, independent, a bit rebellious. And this is okay. We have great citizenship. The majority of our population is women. The population that's most growing, forward-looking, is older than 50. So we've stopped being a very young city and we're becoming a mature city, and we will continue evolving in that sense. We still have many children, so that makes us happy. Many young people, very talented and wonderful, but 400,000 of them could not find education or jobs. And that was not only a challenge to their mental health, to their frustration, but especially a huge obstacle to our economic development. Having women and young people who are the largest force of social inclusion of any nation, undoubtedly of Bogota and of Colombia, frustrated and underutilized in their potential, in the political contribution, economic contribution, innovation contributions, is something no city or country should allow or afford. We are all convinced, and we have worked, and you undoubtedly as well, on climate change, one of the biggest global challenges. Caring for the planet is the most important collective global action of our time. But if we want to care for the planet, we have to understand, and this is the first thing I would like to share with you as a lesson learned and from Bogota, that the first thing is to care for the people. For these people to be citizens who can take care of democracies, because only democracies make commitments that they meet at a global scale. Dictators, populism, autocrats who not solely protect the rights of their citizens have no interest in setting a commitment for protecting the citizens of the rest of the world. It's the democracy, and democracies that promote and make the global collective action required for taking care of the planet. And that order is not out of a whim or philosophical. It's a standard that should guide our actions, our projects, and our investments. And these 3 things go hand in hand and can be combined with very effective actions to go hand in hand. Let me tell you a bit how we've decided to take care of the people, especially women, to care of our democracy and the planet from Bogota. To contribute a little piece of responsibility. Let me tell you something my mother taught me, which I find is very important. Do what you can do and do it well. Many times we're experts in telling everyone what they should be doing, but the only thing you can change is what you do, what depends on you. And if you do it right, you will be making your best contribution for others to be inspired and do their task. Another, and I do it without any false modesty, without arrogance, but fully convinced, Bogota is today an example in Latin America and globally on gender equality and climate change. And I want to tell you a bit how we have achieved this. In the first place, Well, I already mentioned some of the figures. I'm the first woman mayor in Bogota. I'm the first lesbian, diverse woman to be elected as mayor of Bogota. So on my shoulders lies a very heavy burden, which is to represent the struggles of millions of women throughout many decades to achieve an opportunity like this in terms of political representation. I was obliged by life and to respond to the trust of the citizens who voted for me and brought me here, not only my parents, not only quality education, not only my country, but particularly women and young people. But this wonderful city that elected me and trusted in me, during the first 2 months of my being in office, worsened instead of improving in every indicator, because 2 months after this, COVID-19 pandemic began. And we had to honor the Bogota mandate that life is sacred. This is in our DNA. It was taught to us by Antanas Mocos, a former mayor of Bogota. Life comes first and foremost. And when COVID started, we didn't know what it was. We did not have a cure for it. We didn't know if there was going to be vaccines. The only thing we knew was that social distancing, hand washing, changing lives, customs and habits, limiting social interaction was what was going to protect us. Wearing a face mask for protection while the scientific world developed the treatment necessary, the vaccines, etc. One of the things that gives me hope, despite all things that happen every single day, is that this was the first time in humankind time that we were able to develop not one, but 5 vaccines for an unknown disease. This had never before been achieved by mankind. So when we're determined to do something, we can do it. But in that year, while the scientific research was done, while they were made, distributed, resent, etc., it was 2 years that we had to stay at home, sacrifice many jobs. Bogota in 1 year lost 1,100,000 jobs. Unemployment dropped to 25%, or rose to 25% rather, 29, almost 30, in June 2020. And when you have a 30% unemployment, what happens is that you have 40% poverty, because the main source of stepping out of poverty of any citizen in the world is to have a good job, a decent job. So I said, really? We finally won something. We're finally there. And what happens is this: we jumped from here to here in 6 months. Unemployment rose to almost 30%, poverty to 40%. It was a very high economic cost, and yet citizens kept calling me. I was the first city in Colombia that led a quarantine for life, that led a yellow emergency followed by an orange emergency in our city. And we saved, together, hand in hand with the private sector. Colombia had a blended system. This public-private health system saved our lives, and we must protect it. Of course, we need to improve it, of course. But we must protect it, because this blended public-private health system was the one that saved our lives 2 years ago. We cannot say now that it's not good, it doesn't work, what saved our lives. What we need to do is improve on it, because we know where its deficiencies lie. Never did the health system collapse in Bogota, contrary to wonderful cities with much higher economic range in Italy, in Spain, in the United States, where the health systems collapsed and people who died had to be transferred by the truckload, as we saw on the news. And this never happened in Bogota, working public and private sectors together. The health system saved their lives. Global science produced the vaccines. So what we had to do later was to rescue the economy, save those who created jobs, save the Bogota businessmen who are wonderful, who produce 40% of the income that Colombia has, that produces a third of Colombia's wealth. And we did it working hand in hand and closing gaps. All over the world, also in Bogota, the housing, the construction sector, public works construction, public transportation are sectors of high growth and high generation of jobs. But those jobs are very masculine, majority held by men. So we were determined to double in the midst of this crisis, to double the ratio of women working in the highest employability jobs in Bogota, housing and public works building, public transportation, and SMEs. SMEs produce 60% of jobs in Bogota. These four sectors used to be very masculine. They produce many jobs, but they widen the gap against women instead of closing it. So to close the gaps, if the market itself would close the gaps, we wouldn't have gender inequality. But the market itself does not do it alone, and we have to help it do it. So we invited the trade associations like Camacol, like the Colombian Chamber of Infrastructure, the SMEs, MSMEs, FENALCO, the Bogota Chamber of Commerce, and we said, okay, let's make the highest social investment in rescuing this. Let's take taxpayers' money, taxes, let's rescue our credit card, which is indebtedness percentage, and let's try to close these gaps. And I was asked, what do you need? We're committed to you, but what do you need? I said, well, we need training for many women, welding in electricity, metalworks that they do. They know how to paint. They can lay bricks. Fine, we'll set up the training. What else do you need? To contact these women, since they know that these sectors, we don't employ them, they won't come. So we need a proactive way of contacting them, of training them, educating them, helping them. In the transportation sector, what do you need? We would like to hire women drivers, but they don't have the driver license required for this. And that's costly. It's an important investment. So we need it not only to train them, but to help them get the necessary driver license. All of this we did working the social sector, the public sector, and the private sector in Bogota. And let me tell you that doing social and economic rescue with gender equality is a huge and very impacting and very effective social and economic investment. As you can see, the biggest challenge of Bogota was that unemployment was not produced equally. We all lost jobs, but we lost many more jobs for women. We're the top red line, 29% women unemployment, 25% men unemployment, 21 on average for the entire city. Today, 3 years later, when we started, the gap was 7 points difference between more jobs for men and less jobs for women. Today, in 2023, this difference is 0.2. We're going to close it, and Bogota will have closed the entire gender gap of its job labor in 3 years. So it can be done, but this wouldn't happen just by magic. We had to have a common goal, understand where the obstacles were, and try to overcome said obstacles. So now let me tell you a bit how we did it. Let's begin with entrepreneurship and training. Let me start with training and education. Let me tell you what it means to incorporate gender equality. It means that just as the conditions of exclusion accumulate and remove one from development opportunities, perhaps the most difficult thing for Colombia is, and this has been proven by our government, by Best Colombian Academy, it's scientifically proven, the structural inequality Colombia has is given because the social mobility opportunities of Colombian citizens depend little on their talent. Only 30% depends on the decisions made in one's life. The rest percentage depend on conditions you don't control, where region of Colombia you were born in. It's not the same to be born in Bogota than in Cartagena or in Chocó.
El origen étnico de su familia. Es vergonzoso decirlo, pero es así. No es lo mismo ser mestizo que afro o indígena. Y eso no depende de uno. Y del nivel educativo de tus padres, muy especialmente de tu madre. Esos tres factores determinan tus probabilidades de movilidad social en un 70% en un país como Colombia. Un poquito menos en Bogotá, pero igual. Es un desafío. Entonces, lo que hemos hecho es
So
diseñar
what
los
we have
programas de
done is to
acceso a
design
educación,
access to
los
education
programas de acceso a
programs,
empleo,
access to
los programas
jobs,
de acceso y
and
financiamiento
access
de
to
empresas.
finance and access to entrepreneurship and loans programs with an affirmative action that exceeds or overcomes those barriers. In other words, Bogota today has scholarship programs, the highest higher education scholarship program in Latin America. Very proudly, I can say Bogota, Colombia has it. It's called Jóvenes a la U, Young to College. And we've given scholarship to 30,000 young people in Bogota. They're attending our Universidad Nacional, or the National University, the largest public university in Bogota. Jóvenes a la U recently opened in Los Andes University in Bogota, and they've done a study. They've closed the gap between students from public schools and private schools. This program also closed the gender gap. It closed the gap of having more men than women. It also closed the gap between technical, technological, STEM, engineering, bilingual majors. And it also closed, not entirely, but it's on a closing trend, the gap between preference for college programs on managerial skills training versus technical, like digital skills, etc., what's most demanded by the Colombian labor market. So the market demands certain things the educational system was not offering. What Jóvenes a la U has done is to close those gaps so that businessmen today and tomorrow can find the human capital they're looking for in Bogota. Jóvenes a la U, we created another program called Jóvenes Incluyente. We needed to rescue the SMEs because they produce 60% of the jobs. So we went out and paid those SMEs. We not only provided technical assistance, working capital between 3 and 10 million pesos according to their size. That we said, listen, we need to recover jobs. I'm going to pay you for every new person you hire. Initially, I paid them to not fire people. We did this with the Colombian government to help them maintain their payroll. Now we were doing it to retain people, to hire new people. The worst things had passed, so we went and said, the worst thing has passed, let's do this now. This idea you had for a new sale, a new product, an export, carry this forward, make it a reality, and we help them finance this with Bancoldex or with other credit lines if it was a startup or a new entrepreneurship. I believe this program is the only one in Latin America that assesses the 18 variables of highest exclusion in the labor market and pays more every time inclusion barriers are overcome. Let me explain. Bogota tells an SME, if you hire a young person, I'll pay you 35% of that person's salary, at least for 6 months, with all the benefits. And I'll help you. That's my way of helping you. But if you hire a woman, I will pay you not 35, but 45%. But if you hire a woman, a young Afro head of household, I'll pay you 70% of her salary.
And if you hire a woman, young one, head of a family, and trans, I'll pay you 100% of your salary. Because the exclusion conditions are adding. That's why we need the inclusion opportunities to add up and have a lot of incentives for inclusion. With these types of programs, those same conditions, Jóvenes a la U gives priority to youth, very intelligent ones, according to the results, but gives priority among all the youth. The same talent level gives priority to those who are victims of the armed conflict, who are much more poor, who come from families, from ethnias, African youth, from the LGBTI, trans. The trans people have a level of exclusion is such. This level of exclusion, they have half the hope of life that another citizen may have. So literally, they pay with their own life exclusion they live. Through these types of programs, we were able to include 100,000 women in the working capital. These are SMEs. They are 100,000 youth in their first jobs in the SMEs, and also entrepreneurship. This is a comparison with the amount of micro enterprises that have been supported from the mayor's office, and we had to do it. Obviously, we asked for credit. We went from 23,000 micro enterprises that the mayor's office would support with an agreement. Afterwards, we have more than 120,000, and we help them to grow with inclusive employment. 60% of these SMSEs are from women because we have a priority dedicated to the women. So here, out of these 126,000, there are around 90,000 entrepreneurs who are generating jobs, and there are another 100,000 included in the working market. So these are SMEs. Other sectors, I'm talking about the construction sector. Recently, we have a data that confirms one of the most important achievements in our policy. When I arrived to the mayor's office in 2020, only 7% of the working force in construction was women. Danny confirmed last week that today it's 17%. So we met the objective in the participation of women in the construction sector that would generate a lot of job posts. And we are seeing 2023 because we spent part of 2021, 2022 in training, and now they are already in the working market. But this is for the women that work, that can achieve work, that can generate a job, that have an employment. But out of the 4 million women that Bogota have, there's 1 million that are under the worst situation. These are women with low educational level. Many of them haven't even finished their studies. So more than half of them are living in poverty, economic poverty, social poverty. They have health problems. They have difficulties in participating in policies, violence based on gender, chauvinism that kills them. Why? Because these are women that take care. Women that are dedicated to the most important job in any society, take care of the others. Nobody's paying them for that. They work at home, they work taking care of their children, their fathers, mothers, people with difficulties that require a lot of attention. These women have sacrificed all their lives, their health, their education, their economic autonomy, their freedom to take care of others. In Latin American countries, unfortunately, Colombia is there. More than 55% of the jobs are informal. Informal meaning you don't have a minimum wage, you don't have social security, you don't have insurance for health, you don't have pensions for the elderly. But we are all children and we need to be taken care of. We all be someday old and we need somebody to take care of us. When we're old, when we are sick, who's going to take care of us when we don't have social security? Women take care of us. Our grandmothers, mothers, aunts, neighbors, but they take care of us, risking their own life. And this seems quite normal. Furthermore, there is a cultural bias. If part of the sons and cousins, you ask them, what does your mother do? Nothing. They only stay at home. Nothing. What do you mean nothing? These women work 8 hours a day more compared to the women who go outside in an SMSE. A lot more. They work a lot more and gain less, and nobody helped them. Nobody used to help them. I cannot design a social security system. I am only the mayor, but I can use an extraordinary resource that the Bogota city has that has had wonderful mayors, progressive, with a lot of leadership in inclusion, that throughout 30 years had built a social infrastructure that is wonderful. Better schools, parks, community development centers, but this social infrastructure was dedicated to provide education, sport, culture to the children. Where were the mothers? They were waiting for their children to end the lessons, music lessons, the soccer game, the school, and the mothers were there. So what did we do? We used that social infrastructure. We organized it in it's called neighborhoods, so that we can offer 3 social services that Bogota offers today. Taking care of those women take care of, not only their children, it's under that, but also elderly, disability, to have people in charge of taking care of those that the women take care of. So we said to them, come here, don't worry. Your son with disability he has, I'm going to take care of him with the same love that you take care of him. No, number 2, while I'm taking care of those who you take care of, we're going to take care of you. Now you have time for you, for yourself. What do you want to do during that free time? At the beginning, the women would always say, like in automatic, I have 3 hours free. Wonderful. So I'm going to go and do a shopping. I'm going to receive this. I'm going to do this other thing. No, that's the. What do you want to do for you, not for your father, your son, your neighbor? What do you want to do for you? Even it may sound simple, it's difficult until finally they say, okay, for me, I would love to go to the cinema. I've never been to a cinema. I would like to visit my sister who lives in the same city. I've not seen her for 5 years. I would love to finish my studies. High school. I studied 1 year during my free time being a nurse, but I didn't finish. I need money to make a startup, but if you can help me to have a business, I'm ready. But I'm not really sure how to do it. What this system does is offer these services to the women. And it offers a 3rd service that is very important, because this is a social problem, economic problem, but it's also a cultural problem. The sexual gender division of the jobs grants some things to the women compared to the men. And it's called, okay, men of this world, you have to take care too. They do not have to wash. We're going to teach the men how to wash. They do not know how to sweep the floor. We will teach you how to sweep the floor. You don't know how to cook. We will teach you how to do that. So they've missed the pleasure of reading with their children, doing the lessons with their children. This is wonderful. You don't know how to do it? We can teach you to do that too. So we have this 3rd service of cultural transition. School for men, where we teach them how to take care, and the calm line, because we have the purple line to protect women as victims of violence. We also have a line for men, so that they can maybe sometime, any place, they can acknowledge that they are jealous, that they don't know how to manage their emotions, they have a chauvinist attitude, violent, and they want to overcome it. They need help, and they need to know where they can find that help. They can find it in the calm line. When we launched this school, that we received all the journalists, we gave them an apron, we invited them to a free class, and they said, wonderful, incredible, we love it. Excellent. Who's going to call? Nobody's going to call. What man is going to call the calm line? 2 years after, 20,000 men have called the calm line, and they have asked for counseling, and a lot have visited that school. We need to create the services, make it conscious that we have to overcome these things as a society, and offer it. Today, Bogota has a lot of centers, and we are building a lot more so in 2024 they can start. I would like to wrap up saying that we had 2 very important opportunities. They were only opportunities. One, in my government period, we did 2 things. We did organize the urban plan for 12 years, at least for 3 mayor periods. And sustainable mobility plan after 40 years. I know this is incomprehensible for the world, but after 40 years of studies, Bogota started its first metro line. It's not going to stop. And in a month, dear friends, we will open the auction for the second line. We are building 2 electric cables. What we didn't do in 40 years, we're going to do it next years. Bogota is going to build 2 of its 5 metro lines, 5 out of the 7 cables that connect the wonderful mountains in Bogota, interconnected with the massive transportation. It's going to build 24 green corridors. We're not going to do any more gray highways. Only 15% of the trips is done on automobile, on cars, but they occupy 70% of the public space for mobility. Inequality in public space is huge when we talk about inequality here in Colombia. So to do a green corridor is to redistribute the public space, to design it for water, for those other means of life in which we share the city that we need gardens and trees and a lot of things. And to do that ecosystemic design is very important if you want to save the planet. It's a green corridor because the public space is electric and decarbonized. It's a green corridor because though the people do not contaminate, the people who are going on their bicycles should be secure and signalized. Bogota is going to build 24 green corridors. I will get 3 contracted, 2 on the 7th Avenue and the 1st Metro line. And we have care centers and we have all the innovation. I'm sorry, I've taken your time. Not only to have care centers, but this urban plan in its mandate demand to build those green corridors, cable cars. We included care as a territorial plan. Every woman in Bogota should be able to have a care center independently of their wage, at least 30 minutes from their home, so that Bogota is an inclusive and sustainable city. So we will have to arrive to 45 care centers from now until 2035. This is what Bogota has done to take care of people, especially youth and women who are the support of democracy, but are the most excluded, the most, in fact, affected by the low quality of education, for salary gaps. These are the women and the youth. If we include them, we will have a citizen who will going to save democracy. And if we save democracy and the Colombian institutions, we will have people committed with the rest of the countries and development banks to save the planet. Thank you so much.
Wow. What an inspiration. Thank you so much, Mayor Lopez. And I have to tell you that Bogota and your leadership is not just an example for the rest of Colombia, but the rest of the world. We saw this when we met in Kigali a few weeks ago for the Women Deliver conference, and just listening to how change is possible, how we can actually close the gaps in gender inequality if we are actually intentional and deliberate. So I really like your call that what we can do, we need to do it and do it well. But that we also must really strive for inclusion, not just women, but also other groups that are often excluded. That philosophy of care for the people, that really resonates. I hope it resonates with you all as well. I would now like to move to a special video message by His Excellency Franz Fayotte, the Minister of the Economy and Minister for Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Affairs of the Government of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, a very dear partner and champion of UN Women's work to advance financing for gender equality.
Thank you for inviting me to this event and for allowing me to share my thoughts on the Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to this event and for allowing me to share my thoughts on the importance of innovative and sustainable financing for gender equality. I firmly believe that we can only achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030 by closing gender gaps. Gender equality and women's empowerment is not only a goal in its own right. It cuts across all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Recognizing the crucial role of women in the transition towards a more equitable and sustainable future and investing in gender equality is non-negotiable. Advancing women's rights has long been at the heart of Luxembourg's foreign policy and development cooperation. In the context of the implementation of our feminist foreign policy, we have developed a dedicated gender strategy that guides our development cooperation efforts. We are committed to targeting predominantly women in our financial inclusion interventions, and we recognize that access to finance in itself is not enough. Meaningful financial inclusion for women is inseparably linked to empowerment, safety, opportunity, and overcoming social norms that create inequality. We cannot capitalize on the value of access if we don't embed inclusive finance interventions in deep societal change. Public grants will also not be sufficient in themselves to close the gender equality funding gap. Innovative approaches are urgently needed in order to finance progress towards gender equality and women's empowerment. We need to harness public and private capital at scale and to better direct financial flows towards SDG 5. There is room for optimism. The rise of sustainable finance offers new ways to drive finance to address social issues. Yet, so far, efforts to catalyze new sources of finance and bring about financial innovation for gender equality have lagged behind. Luxembourg is proud to support UN Women's Sustainable Finance Program. The ambition of this program is to increase the number of gender-responsive financial instruments in the market and the quality and volume of financing for gender equality. Through political engagement, technical assistance and partnerships, it elevates the dialogue on gender-responsive financing, and it also encourages innovative financial instruments such as gender bonds. I truly believe that we need to do everything in our power to ensure the empowerment of women and girls and to fight for gender equality if we want to achieve a sustainable future for all. As you reflect today on the role of public development banks in strengthening gender equality, I invite you to join us in our efforts to leverage the power of capital markets to drive progress on SDG 5. Thank you.
We thanks for that really powerful statement from His Excellency Franz Fayotte. Mayor Lopez has talked about a lot of things, the progress that Bogota has made. Some of this is happening around the world in many ways. And accompanying a lot of this work are public development banks who are working to finance and support access to finance for women and the businesses that they own. Now let's look at what the data tells us, and I would like to invite Ms. Gabriela Andrade from the Inter-American Development Bank to the podium, and she will launch a report that has been co-authored with UN Women as a result of the Finance in Common Gender Coalition's work this year. Over to you, Gabriela.
Thank you very much. Buenos dias. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to share the panel with this distinguished and inspiring panelist. Since the report will be available and you can look at the numbers, I'm not going to make the presentation I was going to make. I'm just going to go through some important messages that can set the tone for the discussion that we'll have later. And we believe it's more important to hear the perspectives of different regions than just to have these numbers that you can check. So it will start one of the... why are these programs important? Why are financing programs specific for women important? And the reason is that the financial sector is not gender neutral, because women and men have different barriers, different needs, different access opportunities, and different financial performance. And the only way that we can tackle the gender gaps that exist across all financial products and the staggering financing gaps that women face is by understanding and addressing these differences. So so I understand, among the developing countries, the financing gap that this type of the women's enterprises face is about $1.5 trillion. That's like the GDP of Spain. And if we do not do something, these gaps are not going to get reduced. So that's the importance of these programs, but also the importance of public development banks, because they already have this public mandate to foster a more inclusive financial sector. But if they get this right, and they address these differences, well, they can be a catalytic change, not only for the financial sector, but for the economy and the society because of the role of women. And that's why with UN Women and the Fixed Coalition, we wanted to understand what's going on, what type of programs are the MDBs offering to women. We got answer for 54. We invite you to look at the details. And I'm going to stop just in a couple of messages. One, sometimes this may seem trivial, but it's not. How we can identify women, how we can target them if we don't define well what a women SME is. And we found that there's a lot to be done in this, as there's no uniformity in the way development banks define women, and 15% of them don't even use a definition. So if you don't define, you cannot get the data right. And if you don't get the data right, how are you going to design good approaches? How are you going to know how they perform in your portfolio, for instance? That's why we insist that having good data, standardized data, understanding women is the only way to tackle these differences. The focus areas, well, here what I would just mention is that it's interesting that by now the third focus area in the world is financing for green and climate investments. This is, you know, the same, similar to other important and historical actions such as financial education. So we see, and this is very important given the challenges of climate change. In terms of products, here I will only mention that it was surprising that guarantees are only 43% of respondents are offering guarantees. And why this is surprising and something that needs to be tackled? Because women have less access to assets, therefore less access to collateral, and have shorter credit histories for many reasons. And guarantees precisely can tackle that. So we believe that there's another area in which development banks can act and progress so we can tackle these intrinsic problems that women have in terms of assets. Product characteristics, lower interest rates, that's fine, that's okay, but importantly, and this is again, literature shows the evidence that it's not only about money. It's also about how we accompany entrepreneurs with this, providing financial education, providing no financial services that will allow them to grow their business. And this is, the good news is that it's the second one in terms of ranking, but there's still, when you look at the numbers, there's more than half of the development banks that still do not offer these services that are quite important. And what type of innovations they are doing. And here, while there's not a predominant one, this was fascinating to find that the one that was most selected was specifically targeting gender biases. And this is extremely important because biases exist in men and in women. Gender biases. It's not something, it's not only that men have gender biases, we all have gender biases. And then we don't understand them and tackle them, then we can put money or programs, but then the credit officer that decides the loan might decide not to grant the loan to a woman that really deserves it and that has a great business idea, or will give an interest rate that will make more difficult for the women to grow its business. So that's why this is the one I like to highlight, and to finish challenges and opportunities. And this, I'm going to go back to the point of definitions. At the same time, development banks are saying that their main challenge to do more is the lack of data. That's the number one. Number three is they have a limited understanding of women's needs. So the problem is there, but the solution is also there. Let's collect this data, let's understand, let's increase our understanding of these needs, and let's act on them. And the last thing I'm going to mention is the second one, the limit credit history or collateral. Then tying back again to we're not doing enough in guarantees. And another thing, when we look at the innovations, I presented, well, you will see, but the top innovation, there's no innovation in terms of, for instance, alternative credit scoring mechanisms or using of other type of data that will allow us to understand better the type of risk that women are and act on it. Because we have not seen any single institution in Latin America or in the world, whether it's commercial, whether it's development, in where women have worse repayment performance than men. Women always pay better, they're better risks than men, but somehow they get worse terms, higher interest rates, and they get more rejection. And the rejection of credit application is an important problem in our region, Latin America, and that's something we need to work, and it's something that public development banks need to address. I will finish, I will not present the rest, but I invite you to look at the report that will be available, or we'll make sure that everyone that's here will receive it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. And now we will move from the podium. I invite you to sit at the panel as well, Gabriela. One of the things that Gabriela has highlighted and that was very interesting as we did this report is a lot of the challenges that she presents, the solutions are also in the report. Because you can tell that while the banks say, this is the challenge, they also say, if we had this, we would actually do much better at financing women. And so what I would like to do now is call a few panelists who are actually doing this on the ground, finding these innovative solutions in their banks, in their countries, to address some of these challenges, and so that we can close these gender gaps in financial inclusion. And I would like to invite Ms. Christine Lang, who's head of division of EIB Global Partners at the European Investment Bank. Mr. Singh, who's head of climate finance and international cooperation, small industries at the Development Bank of India. I would like to invite Ms. Paola Crelli, who's head of international relations and sustainability, Argentina's Development Bank for Investment and Foreign Trade. I would like to invite to the stage as well Laurent Bidiscorp, who's Deputy Executive Director for SDGs at the Agence Française de Développement. I've even said that in French. And Ms. Jacina Mohan, who's the Regional Coordinator, Asia Development Alliance, and from the Civil Society Organization, because we really also do want to hear from civil society organizations. Now, I will turn to this distinguished panel. And one of the things I also want to mention is we are very excited to have actually two public development banks who have signed into the Finance in Common statement on gender equality. We now have a membership of 44 banks. If you're here, if you're a bank, if you are not a member of the Gender Coalition, you've heard how central this is, please do join the coalition. And this statement really aims to rally public development banks around the common goals of increasing funding and resources that are dedicated to gender equality and the empowerment of women. And this year, our new signatories include the Small Industries Development Bank of India and the Banque Africaine de Développement. So I want to start this discussion with the European Investment Bank, who signed on to the statement very early on in year one, actually. The EIB has a global reach and finances programs in public and private sectors, and it's one of the largest multilateral development banks in the world. So I want to come to you, Ms. Lang, and ask, given EIB's global reach, can you tell us about some of the innovations that you see in your markets of operation in terms of financing programs for women-owned small and medium enterprises? And do you observe some regional differences in terms of access gaps, and how are you responding to them? How are you responding to that data that Gabriela so ably presented?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to share our experience. First thing I'd like to say is it's a global problem. It's not a Latin American problem, it's a global problem. And in Europe, we have a lot to learn from the experience in Africa and in Latin America on how to successfully address this issue. I'd like to start with the importance of actually within a bank like ourselves to get people to think differently about the topic. So it's not a matter of, it's about asking questions and about trying to find the rationale to bring this forward. In the beginning, within Europe, we had programs that were benefiting for, you mentioned the case of the guarantees, to banks in this area. But that's not enough. When you look at the issue of the loans, trying to get the banks to look into this area was asking the question, do you have the data? And in some cases, they said, we don't have the data, but we just know that it's possible. And we know that the women have a lower NPL rate. That was something that they just, from just instinct, they had known. So we've tried to develop within Europe different credit lines with the banks focusing on women. And we've done several studies. And one of the things it's cultural is this issue of family and friends. That the women, what they were doing, where they were asking their family and friends, for the equity, and their ability to take risk is impacted by that. Because if you've got the money of your family and your friends, it's not the same as if it's a bank. And the willingness to scale up was impacted this from a culture aspect. So this is one thing that we have been, let's say, dealing with internally, and trying to work with that on the European front. Now, if we look at Africa, I mean, there we've done some research, and 40% of the banks found that the NPLs were lower for women. So the data is there, and the technology is there, and we have seen, within different banks that we've been working with, we have something called the Africa Women Rising Initiative, which is providing technical assistance to the intermediaries. So the point that was made about you need to help them to try to identify the opportunities and how you're best to work with them. I'm just going to close with an example of Banco Nordeste. I'm very happy to see them on there. And the Banco Nordeste, I mean, they have a program during the COVID period. We signed a 200 million loan with them for women. And we were able to meet, the beneficiaries of these loans and how they're using technology. And we had the grandmother, the mother, and the granddaughter all, signing the contract in front of us. And how they were accompanying them along the process. So I think that, you have to address this market in a different way, and asking the banks and helping them and providing, technical assistance to the intermediaries is something that we have found important. And lastly, I want to do a shout out for the 2X Challenge, because the 2X Challenge, has really for us, any operation that goes through the EIB, the first question, is it going to benefit from the 2X Challenge? So with the definitions, it has raised awareness, and, in sectors, it's important to remember that it's not just about helping the final beneficiary of thinking of women as a MSME or such, but what the alcaldesa was saying is trying to mainstream gender into the infrastructure projects, asking questions, who is going to be benefiting and how, and making sure that you expect to have parity, in the management, and you expect to have this. And this, I think, we have seen in an example in Metro de Quito that they have followed through with this. So I think we all have that job for the MDBs that are financing these large projects to ensure that this is also mainstreamed in. Thank you.
I'm really happy that you've touched on that last point, because we were actually having a conversation about it's not just women as clients and beneficiaries of these financial products, but it's also really looking inward at the banks and how we're really approaching gender equality in terms of the mainstreaming part, but also all the things we need to fix. What kind of innovative approaches are really geared towards the needs and priorities of women? I said yesterday, it's not just about fixing the women and their businesses, but it's also fixing our systems and how we work as organizations to make sure that those systems are they are fit for purpose for women and for gender equality. I want to come to you, Ms. Clary, because we have heard about these preferential conditions, whether it's lower interest rates that are offered to women SMEs. They have been highlighted as an approach that national development banks tend to use more than other types of banks. And what I want to find out from you is how effective are these, given some of all the other issues we've had, the biases, how effective are these preferential conditions in terms of reaching women?
Hello? Okay, so the microphone is working. Thank you for that question. Yes, well, our line, we have a line that it's women that lead. It's a line that is not a specific line, but it goes across all our other lines. So all women-owned companies can access all the other preferential treatments that they have through other lines. For example, we have subsidies for energy efficiency projects, so they can access, but they have certain benefits over that. So it's at across the board. It's not a specific line, but it's across the board. So for you to demonstrate that you're a woman-owned company, you have to have more than 51% of ownership or 25% plus a woman in power or a woman in management in a core business. And this, we want to signalize this, but because if there is a management position, but it's not part of the core business, the operations part, then it's also having, it's for the numbers and it's not for actually managing, and we want more women empowering themselves. So what we did is that instead of giving preferential rate, we actually give 100% of the investment, because the preferential rate is already there. We're a development bank. We are already giving a lot of preferential rates. So what we do is we found out, as Gabriela was mentioning, the collateral was not there. So we did, okay, we're just going to give them 100% of the investment that they have to do, because they may not have the funding to or put a private into the loan. So that's one of the things that we did against the 80% of the investment that we do for other companies. So that was a great success. But what we did, and this is kind of like important because everybody was here talking about data, is we actually did an evaluation. So this line was open for 5 years. We actually did this year an evaluation on the line. So we did surveys to women that don't, and we did ourselves our own evaluation of our bank and our lines to understand whether they are taking disadvantages or not. And some of the results that we found out are really good, and some of the results are not as positive as we hoped they were. So we know, for example, we found out about 70% of the women, they're not taking this 100% of the investment. And so when we went and double click on that and say why they're not taking 100% of the investment, come on, we're having really good rates and out there. And they actually mentioned that if the guarantees go through a reciprocal guarantee society, they only give them about 80% of the guarantee. They're not giving them 100% of the guarantee of the project. So that means that we need to work with the guarantee societies to help them to see if we can help them get 100% warranty so that they can take advantage of this. I think that's one of the things that I'm gonna mention. I think Gabriela mentioned it a lot, but we need information. We are able to have it, as Christine was saying. We do have that information. We just need to analyze this information and review our policies all the time. We are all learning in this process. You know, this line has 5 years, and it's quite of the earliest lines, but we're still learning. Yeah. So I think that's one of the things I want to take from here.
Very important, that process of evaluation and looking at whether what you are actually putting out there is working, why it's not working, and what needs to change. I'm going to come to you now, Singh, at Sidibé. You operate in India, a country where we know there's been a lot of progress in reducing the gender gap in access to finance over the last decade. But I still want to ask whether you still are encountering challenges in financing early stage enterprises, you know, and some of the solutions that you are innovating in that market.
Yeah, thank you. So I will put it in a different way. Like once we worked with women entrepreneurs in rural village area, and we brought one of the women entrepreneurs to take session for our banker friends, right, in the office. And one of the bankers, he asked, what would not have happened that you would not have been here? And she told, somebody not coming and telling us that we believe in you, that you can do it, and will provide all hand-holding support or even finger-holding support, I would say. That is what matters. So dilating the vision right way, appropriate, say, engagement at the right time is very crucial. So I feel the non-finance is more important than finance per se. The physical collateral guarantee, I think information collateral is more important for access. Bankability is more crucial than thinking that any project and every project will get through a bank. So this is what the challenges continue with micro and small enterprises at each level. If an enterprise is livelihood or micro, it has different challenge levels. They would have information asymmetry. They would not have collaterals, as mentioned in the report. Then as they graduate up, the challenges differ. So what we do is, we started 3 years back, we call it mission entrepreneurship culture, right? So we wanted that each house should have one entrepreneur. And then we realized that who are the 3 key role models if we have to really pick. I have my PhD in entrepreneurship. I'm not an entrepreneur. So why? Because I was told I should go for a good job. So I went for a good job. So what we did was, so the first key role model is the parents, and within parents, mother. Second is primary school teacher, and third is the college professor. If you are able to sensitize this link, I think the entrepreneurship will start flowing easily. And this is what we experimented. So I will give one experiment. We worked with 3,000, we opened stitching schools for women, 3,000. And we told, so this stitching machine will hand over to you, but you have to walk with us for some time. So we gave a stitching machine box, and we told, dismantle this. So it was already dismantled. So they opened it with the dreams, and then they assembled it. Again, we disassembled that, right? Said, again, assemble it. So in 2-3 cycles, they could learn how do I repair this part of the machine and not be dependent on anybody. So we taught them 3 skills, that stitching, the second is repairing, and third is training others and doing that. You will not believe that during this COVID period, all 3,000 were working and operational because they had these multi-skills and their resilience became better. So that is what we believe. We in India, our Honorable Prime Minister has been emphasizing on women-led development. And the microfinance part, it has been largely women-led development. SEDBI has been pioneer in microfinance institution-led development in India. So we worked with NGOs, moved them to the microfinance institution, then moved them to small finance banks. So they are also graduating the level these women are graduating, and we are customizing our products accordingly. So today in India, like we have a very innovative program where Honorable Prime Minister launched it, which is Stand Up India. There, what was told to each bank across the country, like we had 130,000 bank branches across the country, that you have to give one women loan for a new enterprise. And then we got worried that how do we track each bank doing that? So we created a digital platform. Anytime, anywhere, anyone can approach any bank which they want and lodge their application online, no physical papers. Then we realized that while applications are coming, it is not getting attended. So we started enterprise clinics. So enterprise clinics was basically simple logic of bringing three people together: the banker who is looking at bankability, the aspirant who is looking at the project funding, and third is the hand-holding agency who was mentoring. And we could find 80% the communication was the issue. So the same thing now in India, you would have heard about, we have launched PM Swanidhi program, which is for street vendors. These street vendors are mobile. And during COVID period, they were the only one who were available to give you daily needs requirement. And 40% beneficiaries of these have been women. And we provided a total digital platform, brought the entire handholding agency, the bankers, the microfinance institution, all on one portal, right? Now the third level which we are innovating is how do you bring this microfinance beneficiary up the value chain, right? And some of the stand-up beneficiary look up the value chain in terms of green investments. So what we have started doing is SIDBI on its own is building an information collateral, which I was talking, and enabling the access to credit to these women. And through our partners at local level, it is like credit at home. Right, and so these partners know them very well, that what is that they can operate. They know the localized potential which are available. So I will just complete that.
Okay.
What we do is they originate the proposal from there. It is screened digitally. It picks up from their bank statement, and credit is disbursed in their account. So there is no intermediary. Directly it hits the beneficiary, and it rests on SIDBI book. We take the risk, right? So these are things, I would say any engagement program has to be aspirational metrics which needs to be embedded. And
fantastic. Very clear, concise examples, very practical. But what I like is also there's looking at what are women's financial needs at different stages of businesses, and what are the innovations that are required to meet those specific needs. Because we need to stop thinking of women just as micro. They also are running big businesses that have very different financial needs. Thank you so much for that. We are running out of time, which is I'm really sorry to stop here, because even I was listening very keenly to that. But I would now like to invite Mr. Laurent Bidiscob from the AFD to the podium, and you can also speak from there if you prefer that, to tell us about this gender tracker. There's a common thread running around data and how we track and report on financing allocated to women's businesses. If you can do that, Laurent, in about 3 minutes, that would be fantastic.
I'll do that. I'll try. And not do too much mansplaining, sorry. Thank you so much. Just if we can, IDFC, it's a club of 26 development banks which works together in trying to better the way we do business in various areas. We are 4 working groups and 1 is on gender, and we are publishing today our very first gender mapping. 9 members of us have been contributing to that, including Latin America development banks. And I think if we go oh no, sorry, I have this. We've just been trying to classify our projects in our portfolio. So for the 9 banks who've contributed, we're doing about 50 billion commitments this year. It's on the year 2021. We're looking at, is there in our projects, they are gender sensitive. It means we are really trying to do something transformative in changing gender inequality. That's category 2. Category 1 is do we take into account gender and do some things? And 0 category is it's not in our mind. I'm making it very simple. Results: 20% of our portfolio, of the annual commitments of these 9 banks, 20% of them take gender into account, whether in a transformative approach here or just a gender-sensitive approach. Which is interesting is that the 20% is here in amount. It's about 40% in terms of projects. So it means in terms of scale, we're not there yet. Ideally, it would be 40% of projects, or as we do at AFD, 50. And I'll stop with this slide to be very short. It's you have the detail is now it's live today. What is very interesting is in which area do we achieve the best results in terms of gender consideration. So there are some surprising results, I think, but it's only based on nine public development banks. Urban development, it's actually the first sector in our portfolio with gender consideration. It's an excellent echo to what Mayor Lopez presented us. And we're very happy at AFD to be able to account for this manzana de cuidados in the next year reporting. You'll see that in a dark blue area. Public sector, it's when we support governments in taking into account gender into the public policies, like gender tagging, budget tagging, and so on. And of course, SMEs that we've been talking about there. Just my surprise is this little one here, energy and climate. As Mayor Lopez insisted in the beginning, when we try to care for climate, we care for democracy, care for the young people and women. And we lots of public development banks like AFD is working on the nexus climate and gender, as all we know that women as a vulnerable population are prone to climate non-resilience. So we really need to do more on the climate nexus thing, I think. And I stop there. You have all the details live. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roland. And apologies for rushing all of you, but I think this data is really important for accountability, because it can't just be we all come and talk about how gender equality is important, then we go back and continue business as usual, but we can have some of this data to keep us accountable in terms of how we are all doing on gender equality. I want to give our last 5 minutes of this session to Josna, who is from the civil society. And Josna, what are your key takeaways? What are your messages to this group of public development banks in terms of how they're doing in serving society?
Thank you so much. So we are talking a lot about data, so I thought I will also do some data. And data looks very impressive, right? So, okay, so what we have seen in last 10 years, the share of adults who have accounts globally increased from 51% to 76% in developing countries, whereas the share for the women is still below 60%. For example, if I say I come to my region, and I've seen in Pakistan, the 88% of the men have their own phone in comparison to 42% of the women. I don't want to show a gloomy picture, but there are some facts. You know, and what we have seen there are some restrictions on the women. There are legal restrictions and discriminatory laws constrain financial inclusion of a woman, for adding formal barriers to opening a bank account. Husbands are considered to be the legal head of the household. This reduces women's legal right to sign documents. While there are very few legal restrictions on women opening a bank account, in several cases, policymakers and legal authorities have been unsuccessful in enforcing laws and practices that restrict financial institutions from extending credits to the woman. So there also in South Asia also we have very unfavorable uninheritance law. So women cannot inherit the property. I mean, most of the countries, right? So these are some of those, also some of the issues that I wanted to show. Apart from that, women face additional barriers in obtaining a passport because they need to show a husband or father's, name. So that also obstruct a lot of opportunities for the women. Anyway, so I'll come to, how we're addressing some of the problems we can be addressing, which we have heard very impressive stories, but also, for example, we have seen a very good example from India. I mean, we also have Jan Dhan plus a saving mobilization program for India, in India. Also empowering women as banking agent to build their income and serve as a trusted delivery channel. I think that could also be done, which is being done. Driving affordable credit for women-owned businesses, which is being done, but then obviously we need to work more on this. Also designing digital payment for women through our partnership and digital financing service providers. I think these are some of the important things that I wanted to highlight. And just before closing, just a few things that I would want to say, is support the incorporation of digital financial services into financial inclusion agendas of policymakers and regulations. And the development community would need to help government to incorporate. So I think the role of private development banks, PDBs, is very important here. And the role of state is also very important here. We cannot undermine the role of state. So I think until we really have proper inclusion of women, the political will to have the women in all this policy implementation, I think that's the most crucial part. Thank you. I hope I didn't take much time.
Oh, no, you were perfect, Josena. Thank you so much. I want to take the opportunity to thank all of you. And this conversation is not over. We will have it as we walk to lunch. But really, thank you so much for engaging. Thank you, Mayor Lopez, for that inspiration. It was really inspirational. I think we are all going out really energized by this conversation. I thank you to the panelists for really taking your time to share some of those very practical examples on innovations that are already happening in this area. So thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.